Hello, everybody. My name's Rick McCutcheon. I'm a Dynamics 365 MVP, and I'm here today on this Enavate and MS Dynamics World User Strategy event. And we're going to talk about building your business case for the cloud. 5 tips for Dynamics GP users. And we've got an excellent couple of commentators that we're going to be talking with today. So let's go to you first, Bill, and introduce yourself and tell the people who you are and what you do.
Thanks, Rick. Hi, everybody. My name is Bill Moore. I am a client executive for our cloud services at Enavate, and my role is just to ensure that all of our prospects and clients have all the information necessary to determine if they should move to the cloud, and if so, what cloud.
Okay. Thank you, Bill. Chris.
Yes, my name is Chris Lavelle. I am responsible for our cloud strategy and cloud services within Enavate. I've been within the Microsoft channel for the last 20 some odd years, and look forward to having a great conversation today.
Okay, thank you. So our first question, we're going to start with you, Bill. To begin with, let's discuss the GP market and the reason behind its strong and devoted user following.
Yeah, most of you know that GP has been around for 30 some years, a flagship product for Microsoft. And Microsoft tells us there's almost 20,000 companies running GP. So it's widespread, very, very popular, highly used. And that's created this huge ecosystem of both GP partners, independent software vendors that write applications that sit on top of GP, and users and large user groups. So very popular application, very well used throughout North America.
Yeah, I think it's a very strong user base for Microsoft. So let's talk a little bit, and we're going to continue on with you, Bill. Why are some GP customers not moving to the cloud and into the ERP systems like Business Central or F&O?
Yeah, we have those conversations daily, Rick, and I'll tell you what our clients tell us why they refuse to move. And the first one is the loss of customization. So they're afraid that they've tweaked their GP environment, their application, so that it's just the way they want it, and they may have some customizations written for specific tasks, and they'll lose them. Another one is the loss of control over their applications and data. Some people just don't want Microsoft to have everything, including the application and control of that application in their own cloud. A third one is there's just no appetite for a complex migration, or what could be a complex migration. It takes time and effort and focus away from the business. And then the one that we hear probably most often is they just don't want to take the time to learn a new application.
Well, and we find that these companies have been committed to this product for maybe 20 years, right? Or even longer. So they've kind of built it up, right? And added a lot of customization and workflows and things. So you can certainly see why some of those items are a concern. Chris, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm going to take something Bill said, but from a different perspective. So as organizations look at their other options and they look at what they need out of the system, often they come to the determination that, at least for the moment, what they're getting out of GP is good enough for their business, and the benefit in the switch isn't there yet. Now, I say yet because as they grow, as their business changes, as the cloud native ERP platforms change, that changes their perspective. But at the moment, a number of them, the benefit of changing, in their opinion, just isn't quite there yet. The other aspect is the potential impact to their company's learning curve, right? The ability for them to spend the focus and effort to really drive the organizational change management that would be necessary to adopt it, even when there is material benefit. And where they are at the moment in the climate of the economics and post-COVID and all the other things that we've experienced over the last 24 plus months, they're looking for a little more stability than they are change in their organization, and it's doing a good enough job that they're comfortable keeping it as it is.
So, and I think this change is going to continue, and it's going to be slower for some people. But I think with the way we're going to integrate our supply chains in the future, the way sales and our customers are going to integrate with our systems, I think eventually people are going to realize they need to move to the cloud.
Yeah, agreed.
So it may take some time to get everybody moved to the cloud, but relocating your on-premise GP server to Azure is an initial step towards migration. What advantages does this offer to organizations? So, Chris, we'll start with you and we'll talk a little bit about hardware, cloud performance, and efficiency gains from Azure.
Yeah, one of the clearest advantages that we see in moving your premise-based GP system into Azure as infrastructure as a service is just the ability to leverage the multi-billion-dollar investment that Microsoft has made in their Azure platform. When you look at what is necessary to run that system properly and as efficiently as possible, moving into Azure really gives you access to a lot of cloud scale type capabilities without changing any of the architecture, any of the customizations, or breaking anything that you leverage today. So as we look at one particular customer example that took advantage of this, we moved their ERP application into Azure. This particular organization was a charitable organization, and during the holiday seasons, the applications they use that integrate in with their ERP environment, they scale up. They need to increase capacity, increase transactional capabilities, and because they increase transactional loads during those holiday seasons. Once we moved their environment into Azure, we were able to scale down that environment during non-holiday time and run it at one capacity level, saving dollars. And then as they entered into a holiday season, we could ramp it up as that holiday season ramped up, and really to the maximum they needed at the peak of the holiday season in gathering their donations and the associated transaction support of those. So a great example of how if that was on-prem, they would have had to bought for the top peak perspective of that particular use case versus being able to scale it up and down as that happened. Another interesting aspect of it is being able to take advantage of a lot of the cloud native replication and scalability. Taking advantage of a lot of the cloud-based replication and additional functionality that from cloud native services. Once they've moved that data into the cloud and into the Azure environment and the Azure public cloud fabric, that data sits closer to those native services, and things that might be difficult, if not challenging, to accomplish with the data on-prem become a lot more efficient and easier with some of the cloud native services from a data extraction, integrating that data with other data sources for a more comprehensive look at their data and integrating it with other services that can create additional business value.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Bill, would you like to add anything around security and backup?
Oh, I sure would. People forget that Microsoft, while they're the largest software company in the world, they're probably also the largest IT security company in the world. They spend over $1 billion annually in Azure, just on security. They have a little over 4,500 security engineers in their Azure team. They meet regulatory compliance for over 200 different certifications, so massively compliant environment. And it's reached a point where you can't possibly provide all the security infrastructure by yourselves that Azure can provide. And I'll give you a brief example. We had an organization that had some challenges with some ransomware. Interesting, because most people think that only the bad guys only go after the big companies. I got news for you. The big companies have that problem solved. They rarely get hit with ransomware or breaches now. The easy targets are the small and medium-sized businesses. And so this client had a breach. A user did something they shouldn't have done, and it brought them down. We were able to move them into the Azure environment very quickly, add some additional security controls that were Azure native, and as a result, they're a lot more secure today than they were before. I also want to let you know that from an Azure perspective, there are a number of solutions within Azure that are security focused. And the start of one is Microsoft Defender. It's a complete suite of security technology. Add to that Microsoft Sentinel, which is their security incident and event management tool. Azure Firewall is the next generation firewall that's cloud native. And the list goes on. There are a lot of tools available to you, optionally available to the organization to help secure your data and your applications.
And go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Bill, one thing I'd add to that as well, from a security standpoint, you start talking about data security in particular, right? We start talking about backups, recovery times, recovery points, RTO, RPOs. One of the things we also have seen and have been able to help customers with is, as they move that GP platform into Azure, we're able to drastically reduce their DR costs, both through the native replication capabilities, as well as some advanced services within Azure, that we've taken customers from a 24+ hour recovery time for a complex ERP environment to maybe a couple of hours to bring that same environment up in a different region in Azure.
And I know we talked about this before, Chris, is, the fact that downtime has been, cut way back. But even think around things like email systems. Traditionally, they would go down quite a bit, and a lot of times it was hardware failure. And, people would be down for 24 hours or something like that. We just don't see that anymore because Microsoft's managing everything in the background. And, if there is a hardware failure, we're never going to hear about it. They're just going to shift resources in your application somewhere else and keep them running. Do we want to talk a little bit about on this subject too, about educating your staff and moving them from a on-premise environment into the cloud? And maybe this first step would be a good way to start educating people. And why don't we start with you, Bill?
It is. I want to make this really clear too. So organizations that come to us and say, I don't know whether I should move my GP application into the cloud and go through that migration process or move it into BC, which is a completely different migration process. When you move it into Azure, we're simply picking up the environment, moving it over and dropping it into the Azure infrastructure. So to the user, it's exactly the same. We do it overnight. You come in the next morning and things are the same. From an application, you access the application the same. It's the same application you've always seen. But there is some education that needs to take place. I mentioned earlier that a user clicked on a link they shouldn't have. That kind of education is critical to making sure, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud, that the environment maintains its integrity and security.
Okay, great. Chris, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing I'd share is, as you access that in the cloud, through normal mechanisms that you're used to, and all feel the same, they respond the same, they integrate the same. As you look at that from a DR perspective, now if you have a regional or what I'll call a metropolitan area impact due to a hurricane, fire, or anything else, you're literally can access this from any machine that you can get your hands on, whether it's one at your relative's house or a laptop you go buy from a store. You really disconnect quite often the need for the local machine to really be attached to your network with specific software and hardware on it, which can be another big plus. And you combine that with multi-factor authentication and some other built-in security capacity, you have the same, if not greater, security as you would in that corporate access type environment that a lot of smaller and small to mid-sized organizations are used to for their ERP.
So our last question today, we're really going to have your closing thoughts, but I want to talk to you a little bit about the process for GP customers to begin this cloud journey. And I know, Chris, you've got a lot on this to talk about.
Yeah, so Enavate's been migrating and managing ERP workloads in the cloud for well over a decade, and migrating hundreds of clients from their premise environment to the cloud, whether that be VPC in the early years or Azure in more recent years. And we've developed a well-defined process to ensure that the environment works every time, and to ensure we don't pull over any sins of the past into the migrated environment. We do that through the use of reference architectures, and then we take those reference architectures and adjust as needed for any unique ISVs or other aspects of the customer's environment. We understand the ISVs and the unique aspects through an assessment process where we gather the information both through automated tools and discussions with the client, and then take that information to drive that process. And through that, we ensure a successful migration every time. Another aspect that's important is because we do all that planning up front and because of those processes, when it does come time to migrate, after we've done full testing and the customer has the opportunity to make sure everything works as expected, the actual cutover is typically less than an hour or two and done in a standard maintenance window. So it's very unimpactful to most businesses that leverage GP and minimizes that actual downtime and cutting over. And once cut over, as we've said before, it's the exact same application and the exact same capabilities, just with the cloud native enhancements from an operational perspective. And the end team never really skips a beat.
Okay, great. Bill, I'm going to come back to you for your closing thoughts. And do you want to add anything about this process?
No, I think Chris covered it well. I would like to add that organizations tell us they want their ERP solution to be like the electric company. It should be a utility. It should be ubiquitous, right? It's always there. And cloud, moving into the cloud really helps organizations accomplish that goal. The other thing they tell us, and this is key, is moving into the cloud allows the organization to focus on their core business and not on IT. That's probably it is most definitely the number one reason that clients come back to us and say, hey, we're so glad we did this, and here's the reason, right? We can focus on our core business now. The last thing I'll say is that Microsoft and all cloud providers, when you're contemplating a migration, they strongly recommend that you consider a partner for this migration that knows both cloud infrastructure and your ERP application. Can't not emphasize that enough.
I totally agree. And I think it's really important, any sort of Dynamics application that you're moving, that you have a partner that's experienced not only in that application, but the ISV applications that are probably hanging off it as well. And I know Enavate has a lot of experience in those applications. So let's just go to our last slide here today. And I'm going to let Bill tell us a little bit more about Enavate and a little bit about this survey people can take to win a $50 gift card.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So if you'll stay on the meeting link for another minute, you'll see a couple of survey questions pop up. If you fill that survey out, you're entered into a drawing to win a $50 gift card, and we'd like to give that to you. I want to make an offer as well. We have developed a total cost of ownership analysis for those organizations contemplating moving their GP environment into Azure. And what it does is it takes statistics from the industry pundits like Gartner and IDC, people like that, and they've determined costs of monitoring and managing hardware infrastructure. We apply those costs to your actual environment and then show you what that costs in the cloud. Strongly recommend that you take advantage of that offer. If you just email me and say, hey, Bill, I want to take advantage of the offer, I'll respond to you as quickly as possible and tell you what we need to know in order to put that together for you.
Okay, Bill, thank you for your time today. And Chris, thank you for your time. I'm sure we'll be back to talk more about migration to Azure for our GP customer base. Thank you and have a great day.